Welcome to Karmayogi Talks, Prof V.S. Subrahmanian. It's a pleasure to meet you, and we express our deep gratitude to you for taking the time out to speak with us today, in spite of your flight disruptions. It means a lot to us. Karmayogi Talks is where we engage with thought leaders and experts on the most pressing issues and advancements in technology and the processes. I've had the opportunity to read some of your papers, particularly on deepfakes and AI-driven cybersecurity solutions, and I found those to be extremely thought-provoking and educative. Your extensive work as a prominent scientist at the intersection of AI and security is highly relevant to our long-term objectives at Mission Karmayogi, and we are eager to listen to your insightful views. Just to start the conversation, I thought I was just referring to Arthur C. Clarke on BBC's Horizon in 1964. He gave some astonishing predictions about the future, and most of them is coming true today. So if we had to extrapolate in terms of that kind of a thought process from where we are today, the AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, or the energy consumptions, how it's going to go, it'd be great to hear from you. Just to set another context is, I read 2 or 3 articles yesterday. One is a lady called Prachi Bansal from the General School of Government Public Policy. She articulated a theme, AI is sexist. So when you try to do a query, it automatically throws up, are you a female or a male, the gender sensitive. The second one was, can it really replace the human brain, which was AI paradox in the Times of India. Having read all of these and listened to it, I just wanted to get your views and start the conversation. Over to you, V.S.
So first, Mr. Ramadorai and members of the Karmayogi Bharat initiative. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you and convey messages to the government officials working all around the country so hard today. So it's a pleasure to be here. AI is now making a huge difference in terms of almost every aspect of life. And in terms of security, the example I would like to use is India's prowess in chess. We have world-class chess players in India today, some of the best, top 5, 10 in the world. About 3 or 4 of them at least are from India right now. But even these world-class chess players, despite years of training, despite huge amounts of efforts, they are unable to beat the world's best computers today. And guess what? They have not achieved their excellence at chess, human chess, entirely on their own. They have trained extensively against computer programs that are world-class chess players in their own right. And so this is an example of how we as humans can leverage and partner with AI to make both ourselves and the AI and the world as a whole a better place.
Is partnership the operating word and not a replacement?
I think partnership is the operating word. Ever since computers, when computers were introduced, what was it, 60 years back, approximately, about the same time as Arthur C. Clarke's comment. Computers were feared by people who felt it would take their jobs. It took some jobs, but it created millions of other jobs. And I expect that AI will do the same. And it's going to be a partnership. We don't know how to work with AI just yet, and that's something we're working out as we speak. Different businesses are working out, different IT firms are working out, and humans are also adapting to this new reality.
Is it true to assume that data is the new oil. Countries and organizations have accumulated enormous amount of unstructured data, which has been built up over decades. From my perspective, AI's essence lies in processing vast amounts of data and making data and statistical modeling critically important. What role do you see data and statistical modeling playing in shaping the future of India? And what steps can we take to ensure our data is used responsibly and effectively? Again, the operating word is responsibly and effectively. What are your views, V.S.?
So, almost all the big machine learning models today run on billions and trillions of documents. Or when I say documents, I use that word in a very broad way. It could include documents like Word files or PDFs, but it could also include images, it could include video clips, etc. So think of these documents as files that you would expect to see on a computer. That has driven the creation of the so-called large language models. It has driven the creation of foundation models for imagery and video analysis and audio analysis as well. So data is huge. India has a huge opportunity here. Guess what? India has more people in the world than any other country in the world. Therefore, India has more documents than almost anyone else. Some of these documents are in digital form, some of them are not, but more and more of data about Indians is being digitized, certainly over the last 10 years or so. That has skyrocketed. Therefore, India is one of the holders of the most substantial collection of data on the planet. That should be a national resource that can be leveraged for the benefit of the country. Guess why all the big... Sorry, please.
What about the local languages? Should we be focusing more on a lot of local languages so that the population at large benefits? Even within Mission Karmayogi, we have this great opportunity, since people come from different parts of the country with different languages. A multilingual capability and multilingual demonstration and usage of content would become very necessary. What are your thoughts on this?
So any initiative that the government of India undertakes must obviously serve the majority of the people in the country. India's got a wealth and very vibrant set of languages, a rich history and culture in all these languages, ranging from poetry to historical manuscripts to just stories and folk tales that have survived for thousands of years. So this is an incredible cultural heritage. It's an incredible diversity that should be preserved. And so India must make efforts, in my opinion at least, to make sure that everybody benefits regardless of the language they speak. This is also a great opportunity for India to test technology in India that spans multiple languages, because the rest of the world has lots of languages as well. If something can be proven to work in India with such a diversity of languages, it is not very hard to believe that it has passed the acid test needed to try and take that same technology and apply it in different geographies in Africa, Latin America, Europe, which all speak many different languages, and other parts of Asia, of course.
I think the articles which you wrote on deepfakes, and also it's definitely reshaping the landscape of cybersecurity and human conflict, making it a lot more complex and nuanced. The technology is also transforming the way the wars are fought, and emerging technologies are adding layers of complexity to conflicts, challenging traditional security measures and introducing new risks. We, as a geography, India, both external and internal securities are very much visible. The implications for these are very, very significant. In your view, these technologies are influencing modern conflicts and what this means to our national security, and do we need to look at it in depth and take certain appropriate actions?
So yes, so all these technologies, are a double-edged sword. The same deepfakes that enable us to create, an image of us that looks like it was painted by a famous painter, Monet or someone else, is the same technology that allows malicious hackers to produce things that would induce you to click on them. So for example, in my lab at Northwestern, jointly with friends at Dartmouth, we created technology to generate engaging multimodal posts.
Right.
So this will be a paper that's published later this year in August. And so just 2 months away. And the idea here is, can we generate posts that, for example, help a pizza place put out an ad on Facebook or Google or wherever, which is personalized to the interests of the person who's viewing it. Can the same technique be used by an airline to sell business class seats by generating multimodal content, think text and image? You know, we generated hundreds of these, tested them with lots and lots of people, and people found them very believable and very realistic. At the same time, this technology, which can be a force driver for business, can also be something that helps bad guys. If we can generate multimodal content that maximizes the probability of a click, that also applies to, say, phishing messages. Somebody could generate a phishing message that also is multimodal, very attractive both in its visual content as well as in its textual content, and maximizes the possibility of a click by the person who receives the message. So we have to think about this very, very carefully. What is good can also be bad, and vice versa. Another example of fakes that we've used in my lab and developed quite a lot of work on is to help combat theft of intellectual property, theft of data. As you know, most companies are facing attacks like ransomware attacks, and in the old days, ransomware attacks would just encrypt the files of the victim and release a key to unlock the files after payment of a ransom. But more recently, in the last couple of years, what ransomware actors have realized is that the victims have been backing up their data, and therefore they don't pay ransom as often because they can retrieve most of the data without paying the ransom. To combat this, the threat actors basically said, well, we're not just going to encrypt your data, we're also going to steal it. And so they steal the data and threaten to release the data publicly if they're not paid. So
this is happening quite often in India, as we see it. Imposing as actresses, actors, and then demanding ransom.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, you know, we said, well, can we, to combat this, can we automatically generate fake data? And so that the actor who's stealing the data or stealing the intellectual property has to figure out what's real and what's fake. And so we're not preventing them from finding it, we're just making them work much harder, increase frustration, increase uncertainty. Even if they find the right thing, they're not sure if that was right. And we're basically increasing the complexity and making the game a harder one for them to win.
But then the point which we are talking about, training the civil servants in some of these usage of these technologies and the implications, both good and bad, has to be a way of life, and this has to be ingrained day in and day out. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I think most people are going to need to start learning about AI and about security issues pretty much from the time they are kids.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, many of us, including the two of us sitting here, have sort of transcended that stage some time back. And so, you know, as you get older, we know that the elderly are more challenged in terms of understanding cybersecurity risks. They are more liable to speak to somebody who they should not be speaking to. And so I think training is needed at all levels, both for the officials working for the Indian government at all levels, as well as starting right from, you know, kindergarten really is the way India is going to have to develop if we want to be a major force.
Which means the school curriculum, college curriculum, any training institution in this area plus the legal profession itself has to completely undergo a transformation to address some of the problems which we'll face or some of the good things which we can replicate. Is that true?
That's exactly right. So as AI becomes more prominent, people are going to have to be aware of the risks of AI. You know, one example I'd like to give is the example of Finland.
Right.
So in Finland, they've started training children to recognize fake information, information campaigns that are fake news, things like that, as early as, kindergarten onwards. And that is important because every time we see something, we must question whether this is credible or not. It's an unfortunate fact.
Right.
And that's going to have to happen from the time you're kids. But for those of us who are older, judges are going to have to think about it in court. Lawyers are going to, as you said, Mr. Ramadorai, going to have to think about it when they present evidence. Lawyers are going to have to think about it when the other side presents evidence and say, is this real or is this fake? And judges are going to need to have a process to deal with that.
Right. Now, the point you made about introducing in kindergarten, if you go to a country like Japan, where kids have to go to school, go to college, go to their friend's house on their own without the parents or anybody escorting them. So the process of training them starts at the age of 4, but they are given some simple task to go from here to there, go to buy something, and then automatically at the age of 6, they have to take their own tube, travel completely. So I think we are almost talking about a cyber and awareness of the cyber, awareness of some of the risks which are digital in nature has to be inculcated as the children grow up.
That's exactly right. So I think you said it really well, because the kids, as they go at a certain age to school on their own, as they go at a certain age to the store on their own to buy something and bring it back to their house, they're learning a number of things.
Right.
First is just responsibility, right? Second, as you point out, they're learning the risks on the road. How do they cross the road?
Safety.
Where do they cross?
Yeah.
Who do they look at suspiciously? Where do they need to be worried? And the rules of the cyber road are much less clear. And the AI-enabled cyber road, most people don't even know what the risks are, even the even the scientists in the field. So those are things that I think we're learning about as we speak, and we need to be able to perhaps create small nuggets of courseware that are, the example I always think about, especially for young kids, is can we produce exciting TikTok videos that they can engage with and still take away a lesson?
It's a natural process of engaging for them.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Tell me something. China has extensive data collection through AI surveillance. And we see that they have an advantage over any other nation. And there's a book called AI Superpowers. Kai-Fu Lee delves into how China is leading in AI development and data utilization. I think in the AI era, control over data has become a significant factor in shaping global power structures. So for us, namely for India, balancing technological growth with ethical considerations is crucial. How do you see the role of China and the US impacting the future of responsible AI advancement, data privacy, global cybersecurity, and equitable growth of AI capabilities? If you can throw some light, it will be very useful for all of us.
So China, let me start with China. China is a very complicated actor,
Right.
and they recognized very early on that data is going to play a big role, that data warehouses store intellectual property, private data that might be incredibly useful in pursuit of China's national security goals. So, according to the FBI, China has been stealing US intellectual property and US data for, at least well over a decade, maybe a couple of decades now. And this, again, according to the US Department of Justice, of which the FBI is a part, has played a central role in several of Chinese advances in the sciences. So the fact of the matter is that we think of data as this abstract thing, but data represents the heart and soul of the achievements of a society. And those achievements and those valuable assets need to be commensurately protected. So unless and until the recognition is there that this needs to be done, it's very hard to compete with somebody who comes in and just steals that data by hacking the networks and of the targeted nation. India also has been a victim of this kind of attack by a number of foreign states. So that's one thing I would like to emphasize. The second is, with this data,
So the Data Protection Act and the depth to which it has to be formulated is too important.
that's correct. And so the data protection legal frameworks have to be carefully thought through. But the fact of the matter is that that protects us from criminal actors.
Right.
Nation state actors don't respect those laws because they are violating the laws of a foreign state, and they want to come in and do whatever they want to do in order to pursue their national goals. And therefore, actions need to be taken that hold them to account for that. Those could be economic steps in terms of sanctions. They could be other kinds of steps, such as diplomatic steps that express diplomatic displeasure with the country. And India did a lot of this really effectively some years ago when they banned several Chinese products.
So there will be a global set of regulations, just like the International Court of Justice or whatever it is, in the area of cyber, in the area of deepfakes, or it's still evolving.
So I think this is a great question, and I wish I could say I know the answer to this.
Yeah.
So let me just discuss what I see as
Yeah.
the roadblocks on that path. The first is that the International Criminal Court, at least in The Hague, has not been very successful at bringing most perpetrators to justice, except for a few malicious actors from Africa, African leaders who carried out horrible atrocities, and perhaps most famously from Europe, Slobodan Milosevic, and a couple of other actors, from Radovan Karadzic from the former Yugoslavia. So the idea that an international court would sanction the Chinese sounds extremely unlikely to me, and as a nation state. So I think the actions will have to be either bilateral or multilateral. So bilateral, as in India taking actions against China, and the fact that there's a trade deficit here is actually in India's favor, because the trade deficit favors the Chinese, so actions that affect the Chinese on trade cannot be reciprocated to the same extent by the Chinese against India. But it could also be done multilaterally, such as through groupings like the Quad, which of course were more for defense purposes, but could just as well be used for other kinds of purposes. So natural alliances like the Quad could be leveraged to go further than being a military alliance, but also an economic bloc.
One of the thought process that came to my mind when I was reading your papers was both the research and the publications that come out of the US or the academic community. They wear an American lens when they look at the problems of India. If we had to look at the problems here, would it undergo a substantial change, which means a collaborative research where researchers from here, researchers from the US come together to take into account some of the regional conflicts, regional issues, regional border facts? How would you advise on that, or what will be your suggestions? Because you do a research with the data that's available, publish something, but the actions may not be implementable here for the simple reason because of the way we are and the way we have a border. So what will be your reaction to that?
So, all actions have a strong social and cultural context.
Right.
And so an action that theoretically makes sense may be inconsistent with what is socially or politically or culturally appropriate. So I think it has to be, again, going back to that operative word you mentioned before, partnerships, right?
Yep.
So I think Americans sitting in the Chicago area in my case, or Washington, D.C., or Europeans sitting in London or Paris cannot and should not be, telling India what to do. But at the same time, that doesn't mean their opinions should not be listened to, but they must be translated into action in a way that benefits India's interests.
Now, also, the thought process that occurred to me, one is the process, the methodologies, and how do you address a problem and define a problem are some things which you should learn. Because it's absolutely structured, it has been thought through, it has been honed over a period of time. Then how you use it, the framework for doing the research, is a lot more relevant than anything else.
Yes, and I think the kinds of framework we use to do research are fairly neutral in the sense that they can be applied across the board. So when I studied Lashkar-e-Taiba, and we had a discussion similar to this one at the Aspen Institute 12, 13 years ago, the way we studied it was to reduce Lashkar-e-Taiba to a table, a spreadsheet, if you will, something that everybody understands, and say, look, I can take this group, and people have written books and books and books about it, but I can think of it as a small spreadsheet where every row corresponds to a month of its existence. If you like, you can change that to a quarter or a week. And so you have a bunch of rows corresponding to various periods of time since January 1990, when Lashkar came into existence. And then every column corresponds to two types of things: the actions that Lashkar-e-Taiba took during that month, or the externalities that were true during that given month. Things like the nature of the leadership of the group, the nature of the actions taken against them. And you can use this same model to think about, say, Chinese border incursions into India, as you mentioned, this neighborhood. You can think about it as in terms of Chinese maritime activity in the area. Think of the whole framework of time as being divided up into these segments of time, weeks, months, as you will. And so you've got a row for each of those time periods. And then you say, what are the social, cultural, political, economic factors that were true in those months, and what did China do? And from this, you can learn machine learning models that are capable of predicting what China might do in the next 3 months, sometime in the next 6 months. You can't pinpoint with 100% accuracy exactly when they're going to do it and exactly where, but you can use it to prepare for what they might do based on predictions of approximately when they might do something and where they might do it.
I just wanted to explore a little bit, is quantum computing going to be a disruptive force which is going to be influencing or redefining a number of fields, and also could redefine encryption and data security? Is that true or not? And the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, in their book Quantum Computing, talk about the progress and prospects. So just like we started in the beginning, 20 years from today, 15 years from today, will it be a completely changed world because of this power that's going to be unleashed?
So that's a great question. And I don't think anybody, in all honesty, can answer that question with 100% certainty in either way. And let me say a little bit about where we are right now. So
even in your own university?
Even at the last couple of universities I worked at in the U.S.
Yes.
When I was at the University of Maryland, there were 2 new quantum institutes created at Maryland, both funded heavily by the U.S. government. And part of the reason was the US did not want to be left out
Right.
in the cold in the event that quantum computing turned out to be a huge game changer. So if there's something that has the potential to have dramatic implications for national security, then you've got to stay on top of it as a national security imperative, regardless of whether it pans out the way people think it might. So from a national security perspective, I think India has no option but to make substantive investments in quantum computing. Quantum cryptography, again, has the potential, I emphasize potential, to break the kinds of coding methods that we've been using to encrypt data over the last several years. And so, again, as a national security imperative, staying on top of post-quantum cryptography is something that absolutely has to be done. Now, that said, nobody's certain, on the flip side, that any of this is going to work. So, and you know, physics has these people called Nobel Prize winners, and they're very smart people. But I've never been convinced that they're smarter than the greatest computer scientists or the greatest mathematicians, fields that don't have Nobel Prize winners. And so when Nobel Prize winners get up and say, you know, quantum computing is going to revolutionize the world, it's very hard for the world to say you might be wrong. These are people with proven expertise, but at the end of the day, you're still believing what they say in part because of who is saying it.
So investment in that is a must.
Yes.
That's what. The other one is the Bitcoin and the mining and its implications. So this has been a topic which has been talked about, experimented with, because some of the recent reports by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance indicate that Bitcoin mining consumes more energy than some entire countries, raising concerns about its environmental impact. From an economic and a cybersecurity perspective, I feel Bitcoin offers new opportunities but also posing significant risks. So how would you see the future of cryptocurrency?
So I think the idea of a currency that provides, you know, some guarantees on the security of the transactions, a framework that guarantees some privacy to the individuals engaging in these transactions. I think those are all great things to aspire to. But on the flip side, the same technology that enables people to hide their financial transactions also enables them not to pay tax on financial transactions that's taxable. It also enables them to launder money that could be used as a way of carrying out various kinds of illicit acts, ranging from trading in chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, to trading in drugs, to other kinds of malicious things. So I think, like all technologies, it's got its good side and its dark side, and we should do what typically is done in such cases, which is you don't ban the technology, you let it flourish, but you have regulations that govern the criminal use of those technologies. So I agree, I think 100% with the fact that, you know, this is technology that's going to be very useful for lots of things.
The deepfakes, and an article was recently written in March, not recently, by Mr. M.K. Narayanan. And it essentially, with a series of elections to be held across the world in 2024, the potential of AI to disrupt democracies cannot be dismissed. It's an interesting article where he also quotes some of the things where generative AI has failed to give the kind of results, the kind of wrong assumptions, wrong conclusions. So is that going to be a very, very critical element of anything that happens in elections as?
Yes, I think is the first thing. So deepfakes have been used in elections
Worldwide.
worldwide in a number of different ways. I would say both in good ways and in bad ways. Let's start, as we all hear about the bad ways, let's start with some of the good ways that deepfakes have been used. One example is politicians who use deepfakes to convey a message that they want to convey to an electorate in different languages. So this is, I think, a very nice part of the democratic process, that a candidate who cannot speak a language can still reach native speakers.
Multiple languages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't or she doesn't speak the language directly, they speak in their language, and there are deepfake versions, hopefully marked and as synthetically rendered audio, that show the same message being conveyed in different languages to reach those populations. To me, that's a way of increasing participation in the electoral process, which for democracies at least is a good thing.
Good thing, yeah.
But at the same time, deepfakes can and have been alleged to be used in a variety of other elections. So one example is in the Turkish election about a year back, with
Yes.
deepfakes of the primary opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who was depicted as saying things favorable about the PKK in deepfake videos. I think last year, in an election in Slovakia, one of the opposition candidates was also seen saying something that was inappropriate. And in my own city, Chicago, there was a deepfake of a candidate for the mayor of Chicago, which showed a picture of this gentleman and an audio in which he seemed to sympathize with police actions against minority citizens in the country. And so it is clear that there are parties that have resorted to using deepfakes, presumably in an effort to smear a candidate, and that kind of thing should not be allowed.
Yeah. One of the things we have been talking about in India, that we should become the AI use case capital of the world. Because, like we said, large amount of data resources and the technical talent which exists in this country. And also we can lead the way in AI innovation. So the country has established a national AI portal, and Adbhut India, we feel it's a step in the right direction. So instead of building just models, the use cases to be built may be a better option at scale for a country like ours, and they can achieve some strategic collaborations and policy frameworks. Do you agree with that, or what do you have to say?
Yeah, so I think India is more than capable of being an AI powerhouse in the world, and probably in the top 5 in the world in AI. And I think it can do that both in terms of the applications of AI to different disciplines. I mean, if you look at the big AI tech firms, you obviously know this much better than me. The big AI tech firms are embedded in virtually every vertical sector of industry. And so they understand each of those verticals extremely well, regardless.
Healthcare at scale, for example.
Exactly. Healthcare at scale, manufacturing at scale, oil and gas exploration at scale, and so much more. So they understand each and every one of these verticals, and the big IT firms in India, not just the big ones, even the medium-sized ones, understand AI really well as well. A lot of AI technology today, as you know, is quite democratized. There are open source libraries that can be used for commercial purposes with no restrictions, except perhaps some provision of credit or some statements to that effect. So these libraries make it very, very attractive for India to combine its deep knowledge of those libraries, the outstanding students who emerge from India's top technical institutions, such as not just the IITs, but also the more regional engineering colleges, the NITs, and others, to leverage that knowledge and combine them with the expertise of the verticals that Indian industry has so well. I do want to say that I think India can also compete really well on the issue of the foundation models.
Correct.
Because again, the linguistic diversity of India makes it an ideal testing
Very
ground.
powerful, yeah.
Yeah.
The hardware manufacturers, the chip manufacturers, designers, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, I think all of them have launched the next generation of AI chips in Taiwan, as an example. And NVIDIA has said that the company would roll out its most advanced AI chip platform, Rubin, in 2026. Rubin platform will succeed the Blackwell, which supplies chips for data centers. We definitely see advanced hardware as critical to supporting the AI development, and we have to be competitive in this domain. Would there be a challenge to have a strategic relationship with these countries, or where it is manufactured, or could they be a potential embargo as a possibility in the future? Again, difficult to predict the future, but I'm just saying that the dependency on this, if we have to be in this area, how do we address it?
So I think India is addressing this already in the area of chip design and manufacturing, as you know,
Yeah.
because the dependency of both the West and of India on Chinese chip manufacturing is a national security risk for all the countries involved. I mean, simply put, you just don't know what's in those chips.
Right.
And it's possible, I mean, for example, I just read something on how China has put a kill switch into Chinese manufactured drones so that if they are doing something suspicious in Chinese territory, they can take it down by just, the equivalent of pushing a button. Those same chips that are exported by China and are used in critical facilities in the US, we don't really know exactly what all the capabilities are. We don't know what all the backdoors might be, and that is why the US has taken action against companies like Huawei and ZTE, major Chinese manufacturers of equipment for communications, to prevent their presence in major US telecommunications networks. The same is true of chips. If you don't know what's in the chip, you don't know whether it includes a backdoor or a kill switch. I'm not saying that the Chinese have embedded this in their devices. It's just that it's impossible to verify one way or the other, and therefore poses a risk. So it's a geopolitical risk, and the only way around it is through manufacturing in countries where we believe that that risk does not exist, or is at least much lower.
One way to address the risk.
Or to design and build the chips in-house, that is in-country, which is another possibility. And partnerships, again, are the name of the game here.
I agree. Sustainable energy, is it at the core or at the center of everything which is being thought out for the future?
I wish I could give a definitive yes. I think there are certainly a number of important parties who are thinking about sustainable energy and sustainable ways of manufacturing, sustainable ways of computing, but I'm afraid that not enough thought has been paid to it. And certainly big corporations with big data centers have done really interesting things, like put them in cold geographies, so that the heat and also come up with ways to transform the heat that's generated by data centers to provide heating in those cold places. They've looked at putting plants and vegetation on top of some of these data centers as well, etc., to absorb some of the carbon emissions and so forth. So I think these are all great, but it's not being done enough. I was just remarking to you when we drove in for this session that the number of trees in Delhi has gone up a lot, at least in central Delhi, than a couple of years back. I don't know if those of you who live here on a permanent basis have noticed that, but for somebody who's seeing it after a little bit of time, it certainly was.
Quite a few of them are in green t-shirts and green shirts also. Finally, skilling and interdisciplinary education are very critical to addressing our future needs or any country's needs. The platform like what we have, I Got Karmayogi, is playing a very critical role in this regard. And it has been highlighted by many educational thought leaders, including at the World Economic Forum. Interdisciplinary skills are the future. So we had to see these platforms as very critical for our future and for providing continuous learning opportunities and collaboration of a different kind. I just want to know any ideas on the future of capacity building, how digital platforms can play a role in fostering competency development depending upon the evolving needs of an organization or the government. Because this is the core of what we do here, and that's what we wanted to get your views on it, and there's a future collaboration possibility as well.
So first, digital learning through programs like online learning programs like Coursera, those are obviously things that are fantastic programs, but as you said earlier, they need to be adapted to the Indian context.
Correct.
The stories that are told on Coursera need to be adapted to the stories that would resonate in West Bengal versus Tamil Nadu versus Maharashtra, and they also need an appropriate linguistic and regional flavor. At the same time, I've always thought about learning as best achieved as a team sport rather than as an individual learner. And we go through high school, right from kindergarten, we receive grades as individuals. We do exams and we get our grades and scores. And that has led for decades, if not centuries, to this individualized learning. But a lot of what we learn is from our peers. I know that my students learn a lot from each other. And so I think, this idea of making learning more fun is
gamification.
Exactly. Is to make it make it a group activity so that people learn both from each other and from whoever is providing the instruction. So making learning sort of more fun, learning by doing, by giving people multidisciplinary problems to solve and saying, hey, how would you go about, I just taught a class at Northwestern on AI and international security, and it was just a small class, just about a dozen students, but they came from different parts of the campus. There were a bunch of computer scientists, there were some guys who were studying statistics, somebody I think who was studying law, etc., pre-law, and so forth. And they looked at problems such as, how do we regulate the drone industry? How do we regulate and protect against the threats that AI and drones pose in combination? And how do we regulate facial recognition? These are not problems that can be solved solely by technical education.
Correct.
You need somebody who understands the law. You need somebody who understands, let's say, EU regulation versus US regulation versus Indian regulation. So you need people from different, and then you need people who understand the business interests, the insurance implications. So it requires a lot of different pieces to come together, and it's a good example of how what looks like a simple question to articulate is one that's really hard for a particular individual, however smart that person may be in his or her field, to get right.
Thank you, Professor Subrahmanian, for this enlightening discussion. Your insights are absolutely invaluable as we move forward with Mission Karmayogi and our efforts to upskill civil servants and prepare for the technological advancements and challenges ahead. We definitely look forward to collaboration. Just about Professor V.S. Subrahmanian, it's a very long resume, but I've tried to shorten as much as possible. He is the Walter P. Murphy Professor of Computer Science and a faculty fellow in the Buffett Institute for Global Affairs at Northwestern University in the US. He is an expert on probabilistic and machine learning based methods to analyze text, geospatial, relational, social network data, learn behavioral models from the data, forecast actions, and influence behaviors. His models have been used to forecast terror attacks and terror network evolution, to reduce poaching, to identify bad actors on social media, to forecast systemic banking crisis, to maximize airline profits and more. See the kind of vast experience he has done. He has written 9 books, edited 10, and published over 300 articles. He was named to ISI highlycited.com, which lists the top most cited computer scientists of all time. He has received numerous awards. He is an elected fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Association of Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. His work has been featured in numerous outlets such as the Baltimore Sun, The Economist, Science, Nature, the Washington Post, and American Public Media. He serves on the editorial boards of numerous journals, including Science, on the boards of directors of the Development Gateway Foundation set up by World Bank, and Centimetrics Incorporated, and on the Research Advisory Board of Tata Consultancy Services. He previously served on DARPA's Executive Advisory Board on Advanced Logistics and as an ad hoc member of the U.S. Air Force Science Advisory Board 2001. Thank you so much, Professor V.S.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure interacting with you, and I'm sure it will benefit all of us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.